Good morning to each and everyone. I'm delighted to be here. Dr. Shantaram, Dr. Peelan Rao, Dr. Kusma Kamath, the other principals who are all here, fellow teachers. I'm here because I'm a teacher. What I'm speaking today is to share some thoughts about being a teacher. Though this session is titled The Vanishing Art of Lecturing, most of what I'm going to speak would relate to teaching in general and to some extent some aspects of lecturing in particular. So I will start off with the title itself. Why do we call this, why did I call it The Vanishing Art of Lecturing? I call it vanishing because today it is considered fashionable not to lecture. It is considered even more fashionable not to attend lectures, because they say all the information is available for the students. It's on the net, it's available. Why should you attend a lecture? That's the question that is asked. Second, teachers also say, when everything is available, why should I waste my time standing before an audience or a group of students and give a lecture? So that's why I called it vanishing. Whether it is really vanishing, we will explore as we go into the session. And I've called this an art. I could have called this science, I could have called it a skill, but I think, like anything that we do well in life, if your heart is in it, it becomes an art. Music, dance, anything that you do, if your heart is in it, it becomes an art. So too, if lecturing has heart in it, it becomes different. It goes to a different dimension. And so, I called it art rather than just calling it the science of lecturing. And I'm here to resurrect it. Why do I say resurrection? Because at a time when we are thinking of cremating it, burying it, I am here to say, come on, let us revive it, let us resuscitate it, let us give it new life. We will see as we proceed further in this presentation. We will see whether it is worth resurrecting, and if we are resurrecting, in what form it will resurrect. At any point of time, please be free to stop me. Please be free to disagree with me. Don't ever think that you're going to interrupt my presentation. I'll be happy to have interruptions. Please be free to raise your hand, ask a question, even say I disagree with you. No matter what you tell me, I will continue to smile and I will continue with my presentation. So you can rest assured, I will not be offended by what you say, because sometimes I may say things to provoke you. Let's start with the definition of a lecture. We have been hearing this word lecture, 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 lecture. And when you repeatedly inflict lecture, what does it become? Torture, torture, torture. We always want to be on the right side of the lecture. Right side is the side where you give the lecture. The wrong side is the receiving end of the lecture. Most difficult. Because to receive a lecture for 20 minutes is very painful. 60 minutes, impossible. But when you give a lecture, 60 minutes is not enough. You want to go on and on and on. So lecture and torture, the echo is torture. When you repeatedly say lecture, the echo that you get is torture. And what is a lecture? A lecture is uninterrupted, rambling exposition of apparently irrelevant, trivial information delivered in a sleep-inducing monotone. This is a definition written by someone who suffered at the hands of lecturers and lectures, who had so many lectures, he got so fed up, the only useful thing that came out was his definition. This was a critic, a bitter critic of lecture, who said that nothing comes out of lectures. Very often we give uninterrupted lectures, meaning we don't allow interruption. We say, when I give a lecture, don't interrupt me. If you interrupt me, I will lose the continuity of my thinking. So it is often it is not allowing interruption, and it is exposition of apparently irrelevant, trivial information. What does this mean? It means when you give a lecture, you want to impress people. You want to show off that you know this much, you don't know that much. That is the feeling that you want to create, because I know this much, and you want to create a feeling that you know everything. And you therefore talk about trivial things, remote things, out of the way things, footnotes, things which are not easily available to the student. You want to impress them with what you tell them. What you don't tell them is the fundamentals. What you don't tell them is what is foundational. What you don't tell them is what is rudimentary. Because you think rudimentary things, fundamental things, they will anyway get. Why should I talk about it? In the process, we sacrifice telling fundamental things. We always tell trivial things just to impress because it's a performance. And you want to show off your knowledge because we all have big heads. Teachers have a lot of knowledge. And with that knowledge, you want to show off. And very often we talk trivial, irrelevant information and we deliver it in a most boring way. What I have given as a definition may not be an exaggeration. All of us have experienced lectures. We have suffered at the hands of lectures because many of these things happen. As a teacher, when we give a lecture, let us make a conscious effort to avoid some of these things, and we will proceed. When we look back at the teachers who have taught us, any teacher, be it a lecturer, professor, anybody, you can broadly classify your teachers who taught you into one of these three. No offense meant, I'm just telling you a very broad, simplistic classification of lecturers. The first one I call confusion master, or first cater means a confusion master. A teacher, very well read, erudite scholar, qualifications, experience, everything is there. But when the teacher spoke, you got more confused than clarified. Intention was not to confuse you. But when the teacher spoke, you were more confused and you are left wondering, why did this teacher speak to me? It is so clear in the book. After listening to this person, I don't understand, I got more confused. And we get allergy to certain topics because that teacher has spoken and confused you. Intention was not there to confuse, but the person did not have that convincing ability, the conveying ability that will enable him or her to put things across in a very clear way. So you got more confused than clarified. That's the first type of teacher. The second type of teacher I call regurgitator. Very faithfully reproduce whatever is there in the book. You are often called the talking textbook. Sometimes you may be a walking textbook, but we are often called as walking encyclopedias. You know so much and you just want to regurgitate. That is the objective in a classroom situation when you give a lecture. All the information you want, you simply want yours faithfully is reproduced in the classroom. Again, the students feel, what a waste of time. I can get all this information, it's all there in the book. Why should I waste my time listening to this person in a lecture? So again, the teacher fails. Third type of teacher, whom I will use the word facilitator. A facilitator is one who facilitates learning, who will not tell everything, but put it across in a way that will make the student think. It will kindle the interest in the student. I call him or her the facilitator. As teachers, let us upfront remember our primary objective is to gravitate towards facilitation, avoid being regurgitators, avoid being obfuscators. Mind you, obfuscation and regurgitation happen inadvertently. The teacher doesn't know he or she is doing that. And in the process, they do that not knowing that there is not much facilitation of learning. So we, in this session, will explore what is it that we can do to facilitate learning. Basically, to make the lecture more effective and meaningful. The vanishing art of lecturing, I'm going to look under three headings. One is what I call lecture algia. Algia means pain. When you say arthralgia, it means joint pain. When I say myalgia, muscle pain. Lecturalgia means pain resulting from continuous and constant infliction of lectures. And I'll explain to you what are those symptoms and signs. I'll explain that to you. Lecturalgia, a word I didn't create. It has been in the literature. I will explain this to you. Then we will look at indications. Any professional thing that you do, there are indications, there are contraindications. So we will see what are the indications for lecturing. Then we will look at lecture as a method closely, critically. In spite of all the suspicion and doubt we have about lecturing, can we look at lecture very closely as a method? And that is what I'll do in this session, and we'll explore this together. It will be a joint exploration. As I mentioned, please be free to stop me or interrupt me. The word lecturalgia means painful lecture. It has been in the literature for so many years. It simply means a disease or a syndrome. Syndrome means a collection of certain manifestations. A syndrome experienced by members of lectured to audience. Now, when you go on inflicting lectures, what are the manifestations? What is called as heightened emotions? These are agitation, frustration, anger. Unfortunately, you cannot express this because some risk is involved. Person speaking is a big man, professor, examiner, so you can't show your anger, your frustration because you have some risk involved. If you express all this, there might be some problems. But what actually manifests are the suppressed emotions, apathy. Nothing comes out of lecture. You come there with a lot of doubt, out of compulsion, obligation, you come and sit there, either for attendance requirement or for something. You come there out of necessity, not because you genuinely wanted to be there. So there is apathy there, you sit there, anyway nothing comes out of it. Skepticism, all this will be there, but you just go there because you want or you're expected to be there, you don't want to be there. Then comes somnolence, sleep. The most effective way to put people to sleep, I tell you, is lecture. You don't need anything else. If you look at sleeping tablets, sleeping medicines, what they call as sedatives, you don't need, I tell my friends in medicine, don't worry about sedatives. If somebody has got insomnia, inability to fall asleep, please administer a lecture. The person will fall asleep. This is the most effective way to put people to sleep. It has been shown. Forget all tablets and all medications. If you want people to sleep, administer a lecture. There was a boy who went to school and the class teacher that day was talking about the divinity of being a mother. Mother is the ultimate. Mother has come into this world because God could not come. Mother is everything, all of us know. Mother is the ultimate in the world. Mother, mother, mother. And that class teacher was giving a lecture on mother. The divinity of a mother, the greatness of a mother, the goodness of a mother. And after that, she asked a question to the class. Who is greater in the world, a mother or a teacher? And this boy sitting behind raised his hand and said, class teacher, I want to tell you, teacher is greater than mother. The class teacher was very upset. I have been telling you about the divinity of a mother and you are telling me teacher is greater. Why? This boy said, very simple, in my home, I have a little brother. To put that fellow to sleep, my mother has to sing and dance and do so many things, he will never fall asleep. But you, when you start speaking, all 100 of us are asleep in 1 minute. To that student, greatness is determined by how quickly you can put maximum number of people to sleep. And that is why I say the most important side effect of lecturing is sleep. No other method of learning puts people to sleep as much as a lecture does. Nobody falls asleep in a practical. Nobody falls asleep in a workshop situation. People will fall asleep more so in a lecture because it is the most passive. And today, everyone all over the world, the effort is to make students active in lectures, making them engaged in lectures. And that is why lecture today has no meaning if the students are not active, they are not alert, and they are not engaged. And that's what we're going to see. Having said that, what are the causes of lecturalgia? Lecture objectives are not clear. Often we don't, in our enthusiasm to cover the portion, we don't make the objectives clear. Second, often it is disorganized. Lecture usually emerges from a lot of your experience, all the knowledge that you have. You don't make an effort to present it in a convincing way. You might turn out to be a regurgitator, you might turn out to be an obfuscator. When you take medication, very often it is as a tablet, it is as a syrup, so that it is easily absorbable. It is taken as a capsule. When you give a lecture, you don't want to condense it, crystallize it, and present it in an interesting way. You are willing to just administer in a disorganized way. So when it is disorganized, the assimilation and the absorption will be less. Next, too much too fast. The single most frequent error committed by most teachers is the speed at which you try to cover the portion. You give too much too fast because you have only 1 hour, you have 10 pages to cover, and you go at breakneck speed, totally unconcerned that there are people who are not able to keep pace with the speed of your lecturing. Too much too fast, most frequent committed error by most lecturers. And then comes, you don't relate or respond to student needs. When you give a lecture, you teach your subject, you don't teach your subjects. What do I mean by this? It means your loyalty to the subject is more than your allegiance to the students. Which means you are so concerned about teaching your subject, you forget that listening to you are students who are not able to grasp the fundamentals, grapple with the basics. They are at a different wavelength. You lecture as if you are talking to experts. That means you are teaching your subject, but you are not teaching your students. If you have concern and care, the fourth aspect, very important. If you have that concern and care for your students, you will teach your students as much as you will teach the subject. Meaning, teaching your subjects as much as teaching your subject. That is important. Let us keep this in mind. If you have that concern, all of us have concern for our students. If that concern is genuine, you will truly be concerned about student learning. That's why you become a facilitator of learning. Having said that, the question we ask is, if these are the problems with lecturing, why lecture? Lecture first to inspire, second to influence, third and only third to inform. I have written this in different font sizes to indicate the importance of lecturing. If a lecture cannot inspire and influence, if a lecture cannot kindle the interest in a student, the lecture, if it is only going to merely inform, it will fail. Unfortunately, most of the time what we do is the reverse. We try to inform most of the time, influence rarely, inspire never. And this is what happens. Then they say lecture is a waste of time, naturally, because all the information that you can give in a lecture can be got. But remember, influencing them to know more, read more, find out more. And the inspiration can never come unless you are the living, loving teacher. If you are the living, loving teacher, you can provide that inspiration, you can provide the influence. Information anybody can get, inspiration and influencing only you can get. If you ask me then, what is lecture? A lecture is intended at the end of the lecture, the student must feel transformed, must be touched. The student's interest must be kindled. The student must not be driven away from the topic, he must be driven to the topic. And that is what I mean by saying inspiration and influencing. Having said that, what is it? All of us know this. I'm only giving a structure, some sort of a skeleton. What makes a lecture effective? First is expertise. All of us are having the expertise. We also have the experience, but that does not guarantee our ability to teach well. All of us are equally competent in terms of degrees, experience, but everybody doesn't teach equally well. Why? Because experience alone doesn't guarantee the ability to teach. Second comes engagement. Very important. In a lecture, more so today, how can you keep students engaged, involved? The more you do that, the better it is. Today, we have to think of this, because if a student is in a passive mode, he will go into a sleep mode. Please remember that. Passivity is inherent in lecture, and let us, as teachers, be constantly aware of methods to keep the student active in learning. There is a book written, 53 interesting things to do in a lecture. There are 53 things you can do. It simply means breaking the monotony in a lecture. There are several ways of doing it, but please remember, you don't do all the 53 in 1 hour, then you will do nothing else. What I am saying is, while the book is indicating 53, you will be able to do 1 or 2 so that you break the monotony. I'll talk about this later on. Third one is explaining ability. Lecturing is not telling. Very often, we as teachers consider lecturing as a form of simply telling, show and tell. We don't explain. That is where we have been faulted. And we use this thing called the PowerPoint has come, which I'm using. Everybody uses PowerPoint. And then you talk the slide, you talk to the slide, you never talk about the slide. Because everything is there on the PowerPoint, you either read the slide, that is, you talk the slide, or you talk to the slide, you never talk about the slide. Explaining means going beyond simply show and tell. Telling them, explaining how and explaining concepts. That is what is facilitation of learning. Then comes enthusiasm. If you are not enthusiastic, how do you enthuse your students? How are you going to inspire your students? If you say, this topic is a very difficult topic, nobody understands this, I have to talk to you because I have been assigned. If this is the way you approach, without any interest, without any inclination, without any enthusiasm, where are you going to inspire your students? Enthusiasm is the key. The most effective lecturers have been those who have been more enthusiastic about what they are doing. And of course, at the end of the lecture, it should evoke interest. I call this the 5 E's of effectiveness. Effectiveness in a lecture revolves around these 5, and I'm going to expand on these, explain these as we move forward. Let's start with lecture as an instructional method. Now I'll give you a definition which is a little different from the one I gave you first. First one was just to provoke you. I'll give you a definition, not a detailed prose definition, but something in a diagrammatic way. I will look at certain misconceptions about lecturing, and then we will look at simple, applicable, pragmatic guidelines for giving a lecture. Anything, whether it is a lecture at the highest level or at the elementary level, guidelines and principles are the same, and we will explore them. First is the definition. This definition is more diagrammatic. Lecture is a discourse. You are giving a discourse. You are an expert, you know enough about it, you want to share your knowledge with somebody else. Unconditional giving. Discourse on a subject where the teacher, relates to a large number of students. 50, 100, 200, whatever be the number. You can have larger number of students, but conveniently one teacher is enough. Lecture is a situation where the teacher-student ratio is tremendously in favor of the students, in the sense, larger number of students, one teacher is enough. Whereas in all other methods, you practical, you consider anything else, you need 20 students, one teacher. That means you need more teachers. So this is very convenient, but it is the most effective. In its convenience, it also becomes the most ineffective, because large number of students, personal contact is not there unless you make a very conscious and deliberate attempt to interact and get them engaged. The students will lose interest. So we cannot avoid this. Lecture by definition is a situation where one teacher tries to relate, that green arrow indicates an attempt to relate to a large number of students who are probably not interested and they are passive. And that is the challenge, and that is also an opportunity. We will see that. What are the common misconceptions about lecture? The first one is we often equate covering information is considered as teaching. This is the first misconception which we must explore. If we consider the fact that we have to cover everything, then I tell you, lecture often fails. I'll explain this to you as I discuss guidelines, but the first myth, we often say covering information is not to be equated with teaching. Uncovering information is teaching. You uncover what needs to be clarified, what needs to be simplified, what needs to be presented in a way that students will understand better. So uncovering information is teaching, not just covering it. You can cover. Covering the ground is in the army. It is not in education. You can cover a lot of ground, but it doesn't mean you have taught. So don't equate covering information with teaching. Second, we often equate speech making with instruction. Speech making is for the politician. The politician will come and give a speech. He's not worried. People are coming, people are going, people are daydreaming, they're talking to each other, they don't understand. Doesn't matter. He will give a speech and he'll go. When you instruct, when you are a teacher, when you are instructing, you are vitally concerned. Are you with me? Do you understand something at least of what I'm speaking? There is a big difference between speech making of the politician and the instruction of the teacher. And that is the second myth. Please don't equate speech making with instruction. Third one, no questions means understanding. We lecture for 60 minutes or 55 minutes and then ask, any questions? Will anybody dare ask you a question? Because you will start your lecture again. And then you'll go on and on and on. And imagine the plight of one meek student who asks a question at the end of the lecture, and you start your lecture and you go on 10 minutes, 15 minutes. What will happen to that student? Everybody will pounce on him afterwards and say, if you have any doubt, please ask him personally. Go and meet him privately. Don't ruin our break time, our lunch time, our friendship time, our coffee time. It's all gone. Please don't ask questions at the end. Question usually will not be welcomed at the end, because nobody wants a question to derail the it will derail their break time. No questions does not mean understanding. If you, no questions, that means you have understood. No questions means we have enough of you. Please go. Please go. That is the message you have to take. You have to have that humbling thought. Then everybody is quiet. Deep down they are telling you, get lost. That is let us accept that fact. when they are quiet, they don't want you to continue any further. They might not, they're very polite and very kind, but please accept the fact, no questions does not mean understanding. No questions. Questions must come, allow them to come anytime. Don't say questions will be at the end of the lecture. Then the end may never come. That is the concern. Then comes least group reaction is learning. We often say, I did survey and my students have written wonderful things about us, about me. So students have learned. Please don't equate good student surveys with learning. Good student surveys indicate students are very kind, they are very respectful, they have tremendous respect for teachers, which is what they have, but please don't equate this with learning. Learning is something different. When you get good student surveys, it indicates that you have related well, and they are kind people, they are respectful people. That is what you have to remember. So please don't equate least group reaction with learning. Least group reaction is an indication of the goodness, the kindness, and the respect that your students are having. Don't equate that with learning. Learning is to be assessed at some other time. And then comes the next one. Academic success is often equated with teaching skill. When you want to appoint a teacher who is going to spend most of his or her time teaching, what are the credentials we look for? Gold medal, top student. You look at academic attainments. You have looked at the best learner. Assume that the best learner will become the best teacher. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. Very often, the best learner is so good that he turns out to be a regurgitator or an obfuscator. I am not in any way belittling the importance of academic attainments, but often when you select teachers, please look at the ability to communicate, the ability to teach also, apart from the other credentials that you will look for. And that is why it is said we often equate intellectual achievement with teaching ability. It doesn't guarantee expertise alone, doesn't guarantee ability to teach. And that's why we say the best learner need not be the best teacher. Need not be. Can be. If it happens, wonderful. But please remember, the best learner need not always be the best teacher. Having said that, we will look at a quote which I think is very appropriate in this context. The best learners often make the worst teachers. This is from Stephen Brookfield, who has written a fine book on the art of teaching. They are, in a very real sense, perceptually challenged, because they cannot imagine what it must be like to struggle to learn something that comes so naturally to them. So the best learners need not. They have that difficulty of being unable to relate, and that is where they have a problem. So they must be aware of it, they must be conscious. Only then you will reach out to the students who probably need a little more explanation, a little more understanding for their learning. Having said that, building on these myths, let us now look at guidelines for effective lecture. The first one is, don't be complete. Very silly. You might think, what is he saying? Don't be complete. Please start off with this assumption that it is humanly impossible to be complete in what you teach. You can always say that I've done everything, but it's always possible to say you're not done this. So it is impossible to be complete. But having said that, please let students know I'm not here to tell you everything. I'm only going to show you the way. I will show you the way. You have to do the walking. You have to do the running. You have to do the sprinting. You have to do the learning. That is not easy, because they come from a background where everything has been told. So today you must tell them, this is what you should know. This is where you have to read. I will just show you. I will just lead you. Don't be complete simply means there is no effort to cover everything. Because if you try to cover everything, you will not have the time, it will not be possible. At least you can show them what is the information, where is the information that they can get. I had a professor who came to class and said, what is not covered in the class will be covered in the examination. We used to laugh, what is this? What are you talking? And then she said, my dear students, I am telling you, and she said repeatedly, what is not covered in the class will be covered in the examination. Then she brought a book. She said, for this topic, I want you to read this book. This is the basic book to which I am accountable. You are accountable. You must read this book. Don't depend only on what I am saying. Please read this book. I am here to make you prepared, to make you understand what you read better. So you please tell them. And when the examination came, she gave questions about which she spoke nothing in the class. When we went to her, You know what she said? She just didn't utter a word more. She just took the book and showed us what is in the book. Did I not tell you to read this book? Did I not tell you to read this chapter? From that day we started reading. What I am trying to tell you is, today our students are capable of reading. They are able. You must show them the way. Tell them where is the information. This is what is accountable. I am here to show you some aspects of it. We need amplification. That is what we need to do. And that is what I mean by saying, don't be complete. This will be a very difficult concept for you to accept. As teachers, we are so used to saying everything. If I don't tell everything, my teaching is not complete. You not only have to do this, you must announce it, you must advertise it. Tell students repeatedly, I am not here to tell you everything.